The Prime Minister weighed in today after Air Canada apologized for attempting to remove from the cabin the headdress belonging to the Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Neepanak. They wanted her instead to stow it in the cargo area of the plane.
Obviously, it's unacceptable. The calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission talk about how important it is, not just for reconciliation to be about governments engaging responsibly as partners with Indigenous people, but institutions across this country and indeed individuals. This was a mistake that I know Air Canada is looking into right now, but from my perspective, that is, it is an unfortunate situation that I hope is going to lead to a bit of learning.
Air Canada released a statement that says, in part, it's reached out to the National Chief to better understand and apologize for her experience. The airline also says it will be reviewing company policies and as a result of this regrettable incident. To talk more about the apology and what happened, we're joined now by Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Neepanak. National Chief, welcome to Power Play. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start off where this all sort of began. It was a flight from Fredericton to Montreal on Wednesday. You were ready you had boarded. You were there with your headdress in its carrying container. What happened then? Take us through it.
Well, then everything was fine up until that point, and I was seated comfortably, and then I had my headdress with me, and I put it under the seat in front of me as usual. I've carried it with me many times, and unfortunately at that moment, the flight attendant from the back came up to the front, and then he alerted the stewardess in the front, and then she came to see me and said, "Yeah, that's not going to happen. We're gonna take that, and we're gonna check it." And we kind of had some words at that point, and then they got garbage bags, and they had some words with my staff, and Canadians kind of got up at that moment, and Canadians were pretty appalled to be watching that. I think they were pretty shocked. I think we were all pretty stunned. It was an unfortunate incident, and I just hope nobody has to ever feel like that again. I know I was sitting third row, and the whole plane had to watch that unfold. And Canadians were so kind, though. Like they tried to feed me after and give me something to drink, and it was a tough, tense situation in the moment. But I think it's a learning lesson on how to work together better. And I think when it comes to Air Canada, this stuff isn't new. I know back when the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, when Phil Fontaine was Grand Chief, even before he was National Chief, they had worked with CATSA. I know that in the airline industry and they'd sued them on the Employment Equity Act, and they were supposed to start, doing reports on how many pilots, flight attendants, workers were in these spaces. And I think that, we're still having this conversation so many years later. And even though we've had UNDRIP, even though we've had a lot of work towards reconciliation, the 94 calls to action and such. And so there's some solutions in my head that I was thinking about the last couple of days. And one of them, of course, is, I talked to the president today of Air Canada, and I said, make a mandatory board chair on Air Canada for a First Nations person. Let's work on protocol for First Nations. Let's work on cross-cultural training for all staff. I've also called for a face-to-face meeting with our elders, especially the elder that had gifted me my headdress, and bring them together with the board of directors, and of course a circle of advisors to talk about some of these really hard issues, but to make sure that people don't need to go through that. I know Air Canada was just in the House of Commons not too long ago on another group of people with disabilities, and we also have First Nations people that have disabilities, and so it's such a big industry, and I know that it's a lot of issues to talk about, but when it comes to our culture and ceremony, that also has to be incorporated and respected. And I think the more people that we have in this space, especially in the higher ups of decision making, and remembering that there's a segment of the Canadian population, and First Nations are very you know, we're a group, but we're a group that's been very targeted under the Indian Act. We're the only group probably around the world that are legislated people, and with that come harsh histories of people that have taken away our culture, try to take away our culture and our languages and our you know, our headdresses and such. And so I know that we have to, you know, we're still fighting for that space and for that respect. And I think we have a long way to go, but I think we've come a long way.
And to that end, National Chief, I just wanted to be clear. At what point were they trying to separate the case from the headdress, and you had to hold the headdress on your lap, from what I understand?
Well, I went to go and open it, and then I took it out because it was really bizarre at that point. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing, and I was pretty shocked. And so I went and opened it, and I said, "You're not taking it." And I opened it, and I pulled it back out, and I put it on my lap. And I don't know what would have happened probably at that point. I understand I'm the National Chief. I know I have to represent First Nations people in a respectable way. So I knew that at that moment, but it was a hard moment, and I didn't know what to do. I think, I hope it never happens again, and I hope we can all learn from that, and I hope I can go on airlines in this country without being harassed for my headdress. I hope I can be comfortable when I walk in and I carry it with me. I carry it with me a lot, but every time I do have my headdress with me, I always feel a little bit apprehensive to go through the airports with it, and it just, because I didn't want this to happen, what happened on Wednesday.
After your conversation with the head of Air Canada and after how all of this played out, do you feel like you've been heard? Do you feel like there's a lot more work to be done? I know you said you want to speak with elders and you want to make sure that we get to a place where perhaps there's a better understanding and being more proactive about having someone who is First Nations in the crew, perhaps on the flight. But do you think we're a long way from that, or do you think that there is at least a willingness by Air Canada to hear you out and to maybe go forward in a good way?
I want to be hopeful, but I know that they say that there's an apology. I haven't received an apology at the Assembly of First Nations, either in my inbox or, you know, I know that I did talk to the president today. He gave me a kind of a verbal, you know, sorry this happened, but I know that, you know, I know that we have to meet, and I know that we have a lot to discuss, and they have to take us seriously in making some of these changes mandatory and swiftly, and not waiting another 30 years for this to continue to happen. And unfortunately, First Nations from across the country have been reaching out with stories, horrific stories of little things, even somebody losing their beads, for instance. Another chief that I talked to had his headdress mangled up, and you know, another chief, Chief Andrea Paul from Nova Scotia, doesn't even want to bring her headdress on, you know, on airplanes, or, you know, on Air Canada. She was there in December, coming to the Assembly of First Nations, our annual General Assembly, and she said, I didn't even, like, they made her check it, then they made her check it on the way back, and it's damaged a little bit. And you know, it just, you hear all these different stories from our leaders, and it's disheartening to hear. And I hope we can be more progressive than that in this country.
So is that verbal apology from the CEO, in your mind, not good enough?
Well, I think we begin to write, and I know that we're meeting. I'll let you know more next week if you wish, but I really hope that we can make some concrete action and changes. It can't just be nice words. And you know, I could care less if there's no apology to me, but for the sake of the generations to come after us, let's make sure that there's true board representation, training, and training not just once today and then forget about it for 30 years, ongoing training to make sure that we're, for all cultures in this country, right? There's lots of people that use Air Canada. It's the Canadian airline, and of course there's whole bunch of other airlines in this country that need to follow suit, but making sure that we're careful with all people.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak, thank you so much for joining us today.
Miigwech.